Hey everyone, welcome back to Rational Conversations. Today we have a very special guest who I've been a fan of for a very long time. It's Rohin Francis from Midlife Crisis on YouTube. Rohin, welcome to the Rational Conversations.
Thanks so much, Abhijit. Thanks for the invite. Lovely to be here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. When did you realize in your life that you wanted to be a doctor? Is it a family thing? Has it been handed down for generations or?
No, I'm one of the very few Indian families where my mum didn't want me to go to medical school. I actually I think it was a natural fit. I really love science in school. I think I probably would have done physics had I been better at maths, but I found biology fascinating. It was a kind of applied form of biology with some other people skills, which I thought were interesting. So for me, it was more the attraction to the scientific aspect as opposed to any desire to help people. I'm still not sure I've got a intrinsic desire to help people. I just find the subject matter quite interesting. But yeah, I find that the actual physiology and pathology really fascinating.
Yeah, you know what? I've always been fascinated with the human body, and I would have loved to become a doctor, but I am so bad at maths that I couldn't even get into the commerce subjects. Like in Indian schools, you have humanities, which is at the bottom. Then you have commerce without maths. Then you have commerce with maths. And then you have science on top
Yeah.
of that for the really smart kids. And I could barely get into commerce without maths. So you can imagine me doing my accounting without knowing maths. Bit of a disaster. But I'm so glad you're doing it. And honestly, you do want to help people because you've got a YouTube channel which is helping people. So sorry
Well,
about that.
even that probably is just a selfish motivation. I think I look at it more as a creative outlet and fun thing to do. And if people find it interesting, that's great.
And of course, you've got the big bucks coming in from Big Pharma.
Of course, yeah, I get my regular checks every week. Really have to work.
As do I. I live in this lush home. I don't do a damn thing for a living. It's just Big Pharma all the way. I love it. Anyways, but you said that you had been talking about, as now the thing is, of course, you are of Indian origin. When did, and I used your connection with India is still pretty strong because I've seen several videos of you being in India and in Calcutta in particular. Do you come back here often, every now and then?
Yeah, we come back pretty much every year. My wife and kids, maybe even more than once a year, typically to Bangalore, although probably more now it'll be more Calcutta in forthcoming years. So yeah, I was born in India, but I came to the UK when I was pretty young. Yeah, I like to cover, I think I've always got in mind, I'm trying to appeal to a wide audience, but with a uniting concept of an interest in science. And I think my videos are not that they don't have mass appeal. I
Yeah.
think they attract nerds, but I think nerds from different stripes. So I like to talk about, say, Indian issues occasionally, but aiming for a more general audience and trying to convey some of the things that to say a Brit or an American that might be watching. But yeah, I mean, I'm absolutely keen to stay involved, and I've met people like you and some other friends from the Indian creator ecosystem, which is pretty different, I would say, actually, to that Western English speaking YouTube world, for example, and really enjoy making those connections.
Absolutely. And I really was very curious. Now, I lived in the UK for a couple of years, and honestly, I was in the care of the NHS for a short bit of time and broken an ankle in the Lake District. And they'd come out on Christmas Day, the mountain rescue, and they carted me off to a hospital. And everybody was absolutely lovely. I could not believe my ears when they said that. I was like, do you want me to show you my paperwork, my passport? I'm a student here. And they were like, don't worry about a thing, darling. You're fine. And I was just blown away. And I was like, this is amazing. And then I come back here,
Mm.
and the landscape is, of course, is very different. But have you dug deep into the Indian side of how India practices medicine versus the UK and versus the US, as I imagine you're quite well versed with that as well. How does it all compare?
Yeah, I'm not. I think Certainly, I've compared and contrasted the three, and I think that's three very interesting approaches to health provision with a lot of problems. And I'm really happy to hear that you had a good experience with the NHS. Sounds like maybe that was a few years ago. I think sadly the landscape has changed quite significantly now. And I feel like the NHS, which is a National Health Service to those unaware, which is their socialized, or as Americans would say, single payer health service in the UK, which was set up in 1947, is a fantastic aspiration. I think it's an amazing accomplishment. I think it's a wonderful mission. It's where healthcare is free at the point of access. So when somebody goes to the hospital, they don't pay anything at any point in that visit or anything like that, but we pay with tax. So we all pay our taxes, and that funds the healthcare system. But the world has changed since 1947. People are living far longer. There are far more medical interventions, treatments available, very expensive ones, and health needs have changed. We have very complex elderly patients now with multiple different medical problems who are, without wanting to use any kind of words suggesting blame or anything, but that is a huge expenditure for a health service now, which is different to how it was even just a few years ago. Plus, we've had chronic underfunding. So I think the UK has a lot of problems. In answer to your question about the Indian and US systems, I think they're much more similar in that it's a private healthcare model. There is a government provision, but I think it is woefully inadequate. And so those people with money can achieve a great level of care in India and in the US. I think if you're rich, you can get some of the best care in the world. But the general provision is very poor because they don't. There's an irony here in that the US, which is fundamentally opposed to socialized medicine, actually has the highest GDP expenditure on healthcare by a mile, by huge amounts over the next country, because we can come on to that if you like, but they've just got the worst of both worlds. I don't know if I've gone digging deep into the Indian system, and I'm sure doctors working in India will understand the day-to-day far better than me, but I think I know the broad strokes. And I think why I say that similar to America is not only that if you have money, you can achieve good level of healthcare, but also there is a huge impact of money in how medicine is practiced. So there are doctors receiving money to incentivize doing certain things. And I think anytime you have a fee per payment or something like that, then it leads to a lot of over investigation and over treatment. And I think that's a problem in the kind of upper levels of healthcare in India as it is in the US.
Absolutely. And you had mentioned that a lot of the system is geared in such a way that it really leads to the proliferation of a lot of alternative medicine. And I've talked about homeopathy to a great extent on my channel. I have touched on Ayurveda, though in the current political climate, one wants to keep kind of a little level-headed on that one. But I have seen that, especially with a lot of doctors in India being so extremely overburdened because there are so few of them per capita, per 1,000 people, that there are hospitals. I've literally had to sit for 3 to 4 hours to be able to see a doctor in a major hospital. And it takes ages, and then they see you, they look at you, they poke you and prod you for 5 minutes, and then they jot down a prescription and tell you to fuck off. And that kind of leaves you feeling very uncared for. And of course, there are a million other aspects. Have you noticed these kinds of things, especially in the Indian system?
Oh, absolutely. I think that is the main driver of, which is why I think a lot of my content that I create, I'm never trying to blame people for seeking out alternative medicine, whether it's Ayurveda, homeopathy, or any of the kind of different things that exist in America, like chiropractic or whatever. Because why are people being pushed into this is because they're dissatisfied with the conventional setup. As you've pointed out, in India, one of the problems is enormous overwork. And under doctoring. The number of doctors per head capita per population is probably, I assume, is probably the lowest in the world. I haven't double checked that statistic, but India's got such a vast population and needs way more doctors than it has. And so as you say, you are left feeling dissatisfied with the level of service you received. Access to the service is very difficult. That's becoming a big problem in the UK as well, for the same kind of reasons: overwork and under-resource, under-staffing. And in the US, that is also the problem, but then also it's a monetary barrier as well. So in all of these
Yeah.
countries, people are feeling unhappy with the conventional system. So I don't, for any number of reasons, there are many other things to go into. The length of an appointment, as you've said, it's very brief. In the UK, a general practitioner might see 30, 40 patients a day, and the average time that they can spend is they've got 10 minutes for the whole appointment, which includes, reading things in advance, speaking to the patient, examining them, making a treatment plan, examining it, documenting everything, prescribing. All that has to be done in 10 minutes. So the actual time you're in contact with the patient is probably about 7 minutes. And
Yeah.
you get all these sort of influencers online saying, oh, the doctor didn't ask about my dietary habits and how much exercise I'm doing and my stress levels and what my job is. Who can do that in 7 minutes? And that's not to suggest those things aren't important. They're vitally important, but this simply isn't a good experience for the patient. So what happens? They look to other providers, other sources. They look online. They see whether they can do things themselves, whether they can see another kind of practitioner. And I think one of the interesting parallels between India, which does have this parallel health system, and it's really interesting to hear you talk about political climate and things like that. I feel maybe I'm a little protected being in another country, but I'm very aware it can have significant ramifications on people who speak out. But now you have Ayurvedic practitioners prescribing what in India is referred to as allopathic medication.
Yeah.
I would caution against using this word because it is a word coined by the alternative medicine in opposition to homeopathy.
Exactly. Samuel Hahnemann. He cooked this up, Pastor. Sorry.
So I would just say evidence-based medicine or conventional medicine. And these are practitioners who, and I'm not at all rubbishing the entire field of Ayurvedic medicine, but they are not trained in the same way. And you now have news reports of them performing operations. This is really shocking. And I think in India, it's tolerated because the government know they cannot provide a good level of service for the general population. So they almost have, for many years, allowed homeopathy and Ayurvedic medicine to exist as parallel health systems. But now, in recent years, are actually promoting them. They're elevating them to a fully legitimized form of medicine, because then they will mollify the population, who will then feel like they're being cared for and are being duped, because these are things that are not actually going to help them, but they will at least feel, oh yes, I'm receiving some level of care.
Yeah.
And in America, the equivalent is the kind of Maha movement, which has really risen to the fore in the last year or so, with RFK Jr. becoming the health secretary in the US, who has no medical training and is the most prominent anti-vaccine voice. And you have this wellness world, which has again been legitimized in a similar way. So I think that those are some very striking parallels between the two countries.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, of course, RFK Jr. is an absolute nightmare when it comes to having him in charge of an entire nation's medical system. It is the worst possible scenario. But there's one thing. See, I also thought that Ayurvedic practitioners, especially in India, have absolutely no clue when it comes to standards of care. And I was actually corrected on this by a couple of people. And I was told that people who have been to college and studied Ayurveda and studied homeopathy, apparently in India, getting into an alternative medicine college and course is actually a backdoor into getting into mainstream medicine, especially in some parts of India, including Maharashtra. And you are actually given some basic training in standards of care. So even if you don't turn out to be like a mainstream, like a doctor by the end of your course, you can become like an assistant nurse of some sort. You can actually apply as nurse personnel, if that's the correct term. Sorry about that. So I was actually quite pleasantly surprised that actually these guys do actually have some basic sense of what the standards of care should be. But of course, when your head is so full of completely unscientific ideas, it makes you wonder what are the things that you're actually going to provide the patient if they're in trouble. And if you're the only person around to provide them with care, it is a very scary thought indeed. And
I wouldn't
sorry,
be
Vivek.
too reassured, to be honest.
Yeah,
I think,
cautiously
yes,
reassured.
sure, there are some basic kind of tenets that would be passed on, but as you say, ultimately it's a backdoor. Why create this separate parallel route? Why not just educate more nurses? Why not just educate more MBBS doctors? Create more medical school places rather than saying, okay, people who graduated from other schools can now perform some of the same tasks. Again, there is this kind of interesting historical parallel that a lot of people don't realize, that in the US is the only country where you can be an MD doctor, or you can also be something called a DO, which is a doctor of osteopathy, and
Yeah.
end up as a medical doctor. And in the US now, they are interchangeable. So you can come out of DO school and go into any kind of medical residency, but it wasn't always the case. And so a lot of the online doctors you may see, because I think DO doctors are overrepresented in the medical influencer world, because they do tend to still, while they now learn absolutely legitimate formal medical education and can become doctors like in any field like anything else, they also still have some pseudoscientific parts of their curriculum from the origins of osteopathy. And they've modernized and updated, but you still have some prominent doctors online, like Dr. Mike, for example, who's DO.
Yeah, I was very surprised to find that out. I was like,
And
I was totally blown away.
I think his content is absolutely fine, and
Absolutely.
I think he's a very good influence and says very sensible stuff online. But there is this aspect of corrections and manipulation of the spine and things like this that come from osteopathy that remain in their education. And it's a very odd system that I think people outside the US don't realize. And generally, and I don't want to speak out of turn here, I'm not from that country, but the perception is, which is based on statistics, that is it's harder to get into MD medical school. So people who end up with DOs maybe didn't get into MD school, but there's also a cost implication. It's cheaper to go. I don't want to cast any aspersions, but it's weird to have this parallel system. In every other country, to become a doctor, you just go to medical school. And I wonder if that's the end destination for Ayurvedic or homeopathic or Unani or all these other parallel Ayush affiliated specialties, is that we will start funneling them all into a kind of practitioner, medical practitioner, and people will come from different backgrounds. The upshot of that is, I think, it's very confusing for patients. We've got a version of that in the UK, in that there has been creation of roles like nurse consultant or surgical practitioner or things like that, where the job title is a bit confusing to the patient. And often surveys have done on patients where they haven't realized that the person that's been treating them, even doing an operation on them, people doing an angiogram, all kinds of quite significant procedures and treatments, they had no idea that person wasn't actually a doctor. Again, it's another way of doing this. One argument is that, look, if you're achieving a certain standard of care, what's the problem? What background somebody comes from? I don't subscribe to that way of thinking. I think we have a pathway to generate surgeons, doctors, and people like that. Why not just put resources into that? That's tried and tested.
Absolutely.
And people, ultimately, patients want to be treated by doctors with a proper education. I don't think they want people who have come in via a back door.
Yeah, but then, that's where I feel that modern medicine has a lot to learn from the alternative practitioners because of this conveyor belt factory medical.
I agree.
I think because the alternative medicine people have this, like even I went to when I was to live in Calcutta back in the day when I was a kid. I remember going to an homeopath and he sat me down and we had a long discussion, which went on for about half an hour at least, where he would not only read my palm, but also check my pulse. He'd check my heart rate, my breathing. He'd ask me about what I did in school and what I ate. And he asked me all sorts of what seemed like unrelated questions, but questions that meant that he was interested in who you are. Unfortunately, that is something that mainstream doctors should be doing with as many patients as possible. And I've tried my level best, and it has taken time and money to be able to find a doctor who is able to take care of me in that way, instead of going to somebody who just looks at me for 5 minutes and throws me a prescription and chucks me out the door. I think more people should be doing that. I think more doctors should be practicing in that manner. I think more people should be demanding that their doctors practice in that manner. And unfortunately, that also leads to this horrible falsehood that alternative medicine always treats the root cause and modern medicine treats only the symptoms. How do you react to that statement that I'm sure you've heard thrown around quite a bit?
Yeah, there's a very common trope from quacks and wellness influencers that conventional doctors don't look at the root cause. I think that is clearly an absurd statement because, that's exactly what we study is what causes disease. But the kernel of truth that is often the way with pseudoscience that leads to people believing this is that the perception of the patient, as you exactly say, is that it's just the doctor throwing some prescription at the classic example being, oh, take an antidepressant, rather than exploring, hang on, why is this patient feeling this way? Should we do some tests? And a lot of the time, it's not a simple, straightforward answer, but there are many complex lifestyle factors. And we all look at the modern world today. It's particularly in India, I think, where some of these problems are especially acute. Our working lives are very hard. We're all working very long days, sitting in front of a computer, not doing enough exercise, eating unhealthy food, and things out of our control, like air quality and things like that, are all contributing to these symptoms. And one approach, which is the kind of conventional doctor approach, is, oh, here, yeah, try this pill, because that's all they feel they have the ability to do. And even though that doctor, I guarantee you, I promise you, the majority of normal doctors want to spend some time with the patient. They want to explore those factors, but they just don't have the resources, don't have the time. And I completely agree. You go to a alternative medicine practitioner, you have a half an hour, you have an hour, but of course, you're paying. So that's the key difference here. They will spend time with you and they'll do exactly that. You will feel heard, you will feel listened to. And I think you summed it up really nicely by saying that while they do some mystical stuff, they also do some very conventional, sensible things like taking a proper history and maybe doing some standard blood tests and other medical tests. It's impossible to just think about alternative medicine and say, oh, these guys are taking advantage of people without looking at our own role in this. And as doctors, where we have in these three countries we're focusing on, each one has created a healthcare system where the patient is not being well served. So I absolutely agree that it's not a level playing field here. We're comparing completely different experiences. And yeah, I think that is a fundamental thing that how could someone like RFK Jr. rise to the highest level of health in the most powerful country in the world when just a few years ago, any mainstream person would have called him a complete kook and quack. This is not like some guy saying, hey, we should exercise more and eat less processed food. No, this guy is a lunatic. Like he's
Yes,
linked
absolutely.
Wi-Fi and 5G to cancer. He's talked about vaccines for the last 25 years, constantly changing the goalposts when he's proven wrong. He ignores all data that doesn't suit what he says, and is anybody, even people like Joe Rogan, just a few years ago would have said, this guy's mad. But now we've reached a point where people are trusting him over normal doctors because their perception of the medical industry in America is one which is corrupt with money, where insurance companies are gouging hospitals and patients. And look, we had a CEO of a medical insurance company get assassinated. That's
Yeah,
where we're at in America. So, of course, we've got to examine our own role in how people have. I'm not saying, I'm not excusing any of these charlatans' behavior, but that's how we've got there.
absolutely. And but now the thing is that we've talked about the extremes of mainstream medicine versus alternative medicine, but there is this relatively new middle, like a blurred middle line called functional medicine or integrated
Hmm.
medicine. Have you encountered it much?
Oh, very much. Yeah. It's not a real field. They're claiming that this lifestyle medicine and functional medicine interchangeably, they're just rebranding of things that already exist. Alternative medicine was rebranded complementary medicine to
Ah,
try and move away from this kind of pseudoscientific interpretation. And functional medicine was coined, I forget when, and it's often used interchangeably with lifestyle medicine. And on the surface, if you go to the British Society of Lifestyle Medicine, the pillars are absolutely reasonable. The importance
hmm.
of lifestyle factors on health, all the things we've just been talking about, diet, exercise, all these kinds of things. That sounds perfectly legitimate. Why do I have a problem with functional medicine or lifestyle medicine? Is because that is already just normal medicine. A good doctor is already thinking about those things. I fully accept that what we've just been talking about is that is not always practiced in reality for reasons outside the doctor's control. And a lot of lifestyle medicine and functional medicine is a what's the word? I don't want to keep using the phrase backdoor today, but it's a sort of gateway
I want to
into
be a backdoor man. Sorry.
it's a gateway to non-evidence based stuff. So I
Yeah.
see a lot now young doctors who are quite idealistic and they really want to help their patients, and that's fantastic. And I just had dinner. I gave a talk at a meeting yesterday with a lot of local general practitioners, family doctors from the area. And I was sitting next to a doctor about my age, and she's really enthused by lifestyle medicine and functional medicine, and she is a totally legitimate GP. I don't want to ever suggest that people interested in these fields are doing something wrong, because she's looking at this that this is a kind of medicine I want to be practicing, because she's become disillusioned with her day-to-day work because she is feeling like she's on this conveyor belt that she's just not actually helping anyone. They're coming in with complex
Yeah.
problems, she's not able to help them, so she's feeling the allure of this kind of going to conferences talking about lifestyle medicine and how we should be taking dietary histories from patients and everything. Yeah, we should. That's good. It's not a separate field. It's not
Exactly.
a new thing. It's just that we've lost the ability to do these things. And then you see people getting pulled into the direction of quackery by embracing these things and turning their back on normal medicine. So I
Yeah.
think much of functional medicine, lifestyle medicine is fine, but I don't think it is a real new thing in itself. It is just good conventional medicine. And if we're not doing that's on us, but I don't feel we need to reinvent the wheel here.
Yeah, but it's really, but do you think that is it just the standards of care and the amount of care that a mainstream doctor can provide versus the amount of time that a functional medicine doctor can spend with you? Or is there something truly lacking in medicine itself, in the science, that's stopping us from actually providing the level of care that patients need? There are so many idiopathic conditions like fibromyalgia, which is poo-pooed by a lot of doctors. Is that another factor, do you think, that's holding it back? That's holding modern medicine back from reaching people that it should be able to reach?
I think it's a great question. I think there are two aspects to this. I wouldn't say. I think the main one is probably the banner headline would be uncertainty, and you're absolutely right that in medicine, a lot of times we don't know. We can't put our finger on and say, look, if somebody comes and says, look, I'm just feeling lousy, there are probably 100 different contributing factors. And it's disingenuous or dishonest of me to say this is the problem because it's rarely that simple. Medicine is complex. And for all the reasons we've talked about already, people are often feeling that their health is getting affected, but we can't necessarily put our finger on one cause. Whereas a lifestyle functional alternative kind of practitioner will often, their modus operandi is to send off a battery of tests, like maybe dozens, sorry, I banged the microphone, dozens of tests. And if you do, that's what we call a shopping expedition. You will find
Oh,
something abnormal and then say, aha, your vitamin D is slightly low. This is the problem. And then they will obviously offer some treatment. And a lot of the time, the treatment is not necessarily harmful. A vitamin D supplement is not going to do much harm in normal quantities. But then the patient may end up feeling better. And that could just be a placebo. And yet, their experience is that the lifestyle medicine person or whoever, whatever we're calling them had identified a problem and I feel better. And that, if it's a placebo, is unlikely to be permanent. It's probably going to be transient, but then, of course, you're creating the business model that people will keep coming back. And looking for an easy answer, looking for certainty, I think is the big promise that can be made, where doctors like me speak in probabilities, we speak in vague terms, we speak in the chances are, it's unlikely, it's likely, whereas a alternative medicine practitioner will say, this will definitely help you. They'll speak in certain terms, and that's what people want. They want, so this is why people believe in conspiracy theories. They want certainty in an uncertain, confusing world. They want some sort of explanation why they're feeling a certain way. Somebody can provide it for them. So I don't think that's modern medicine being held back. I think that is just science in general. The human body is immensely complex. It's the most complex system we know, and we don't fully understand it. And to try and provide easy answers, I think, is just not good science. So that's, but in the other aspect of your question is whether modern medicine poo-poos these things, I think is also true. So that it is a failing. I think we can be the motivation, I think, not motivation, but I think the reason why a lot of doctors don't have an interest in fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue syndrome, long COVID, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, these are very common conditions which affect people, particularly in younger age groups, where what we won't find a clear organic cause. We'll do a lot of tests and say, look, everything's come back normal. And the doctor might well convey that in a way that they think nothing's wrong with you. That's what the patient hears, is like, this is in your head.
yeah.
That I think is because maybe you feel I'm being too charitable to doctors here, but I think that is because doctors feel frustrated because they have nothing to offer. And that's a bad feeling.
Yeah.
That's the fundamental reason we do what we do. We want to make people feel better. And if a doctor can't do that, they feel upset, they feel frustrated, and they may take that out in the wrong way. They may say, look, there's nothing wrong with you. Don't waste my time. Just go away. And that's really bad. That's not what we want to be doing. But I fully accept that is often happening. And the alternative medicine practitioner will, their first success, the reason they will win over is that they will just say, hey, listen, you're experiencing these symptoms and we're going to try and figure out what's going on. Now, where, of course, I would object is that then they will offer something which hasn't been proven to work, whether it's their own supplement or some quack therapy. That's not defendable. But acknowledging the problem and not acknowledging the patient's symptoms and experience is something that we don't do well. because we don't have the answers. And so say here in the NHS, where the government has to justify expenditure, they will
Mm.
look at these conditions and say, look, they're not life-threatening. They're not cancer. They're not killing people early. They are generally what is called benign in comparing to diseases where there's an organic pathology. So they will say, we're not going to allocate resources. We're not going to do research in this field. We're not going to start a clinic for this stuff. And that feels like you're just being neglected, like nobody's doing anything to help you. That is a big problem. And one positive I thought might come out of the pandemic is that we would allocate more resource to researching some of these things, with long COVID becoming a big problem. But that's pretty much dried up already, I would say. There are still a few research teams working in the field, but a lot of the kind of long COVID clinics have closed. A lot of services won't accept referrals for chronic fatigue syndrome or POTS or hypermobility and all these kinds of associated conditions. So the patient feels abandoned.
And that's a horrible thing. I think Physics Girl, if you know, remember Physics Girl from YouTube, she's been going through.
Fantastic.
Yeah, she's gone through a long tryst with long COVID, with barely being able to get out of bed. It's been absolutely awful. I've been trying to keep tabs on how she's been doing, but now she's made a very good recovery and she's continues to recover. But that is very disheartening to hear. And I was wondering, like, is there any way that we, like, as humans, because we have to acknowledge that doctors are also human. And if they deal with something badly, they're just not being their best selves, maybe at that point of time. Maybe they're having a bad day. And that's something that we have to understand. But is there something that we can do personally from our own individual standpoints to be able to ask our doctors to be better in certain ways? Or how can we help the system improve in our own little ways?
That's a tough question. Reluctant to try and suggest individuals are the ones responsible for combating systemic problems. I think the doctor as an individual or the patient, these are problems outside their control. But what can we do as patients? There are no easy. I was going to say education is important to educate yourself, but then the obvious question is how. You go on Instagram and YouTube, you're more likely to find bad information, and that's maybe going to lead you talking about Physics Girl, who is just one of the best science YouTubers. And I don't know her, we've never met or anything, but we followed each other, and I've all of my friends in the kind of science YouTube world have been following what's been happening with her over the last 3 years, isn't it? Completely debilitated by long COVID, one of the most severe cases I've seen. And obviously there's huge goodwill for her to get better. And I've thought about covering this. I didn't want to. I don't want to focus on an individual or anything like that. But her husband, Kyle, has been posting updates of different things they've been trying. And while I want more than anything for her to get better, sometimes I get a little uncomfy with the stuff that he's posted, because I feel like they're being taken advantage of. I feel like they've flown to some clinic or something and are trying some experimental treatment. And of course, why wouldn't you in their position? You want to try anything. You want to, if somebody's promising that this may work, you're desperate. But when I've looked at it, I'm like, oh, this does not seem like it's got any possible bioplausibility to it. And I feel, is that me ringing on your end or my end? I
think you're ringing somewhere. Probably you.
I don't know where it's ringing, but anyway, sorry. I feel concerned that people in a vulnerable position like that, who are desperate for some progress, do get taken advantage of. I can't remember what the original question was now. What can people do? Yeah, I think it's extremely tough. But in your interactions with doctors, I think my comments are generally aimed at doctors, and I often speak to medical audiences, and I say, look, you've got to try and meet the patient where they are, rather than saying, look, there's nothing wrong with you. Say, what are you feeling? What do you want to get out of this consultation? And that's something we're often taught to ask. What is your objective coming here today? What do you want? And then try to explore with them why something that maybe they've seen online is unlikely to actually help them get to their destination. And maybe we can explore some ways to do it which are more grounded in evidence, and then be honest and say, look, we've exhausted the resources available to us. I'm really sorry I haven't been able to make you feel better. I've been able to exclude XYZ, which I think is very important. I don't feel it is any of these conditions which you may be feeling anxiety about, but I can't tell you exactly what it is. And I wish I could, but I also don't want you to spend lots of money going down this particular path with this therapy that you've seen, because I think that is potentially dangerous or whatever. And just speak to each other like human beings. And I think that's often missing. Some of the stories I hear from India, it really feels like a cattle market. And I think the humanity's gone.
Especially in the government hospitals, where they're so overburdened with such a huge influx of people, especially, of course, I'm talking about in urban centers where we do have large government hospitals. And the doctors have absolutely no capacity to be able to care for everybody equally. The hospital itself doesn't have enough beds to care for everybody equally. And then, of course, the problem spreads out into the weeds, into the further and further into rural India, where we have absolutely no adequate medical interventions at all. And if there are any, a lot of the interventions will be traditional medicine, because that's what the people will know, because they wouldn't have had adequate medical training otherwise. But thank you very much. I know that we're a little short on time today, so I won't keep you much any longer. And thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully we'll be able to get into a second part of this conversation, but thank you so much for joining us. This has been very enlightening and educational. Oh, I'm all over the place today.
No, it's been great. I'm sorry if I rambled and ranted. Sometimes I noticed that I've been speaking unopposed for several minutes. But,
no, that's fine. I love that when I'm talking to somebody and we're talking passionately about the topics that we're interested in. And I certainly hope that with this conversation and the things that we've talked about, I hope that a few of our listeners have maybe gotten a slightly better idea on how to question their doctors and ask and maybe even demand for better treatment and more time from their doctors, even if it's a little bit. And it might hopefully help someone some way. So thank you very much for joining us. And I definitely hope that this will help somebody else other than the two of us, of course.
I hope so. And I know it is tough, but yeah, I'd love to chat more. And I'd love to also get to know more about what it's like on the ground, obviously from family interactions and things like that. I know that how prevalent some of these unscientific beliefs are. And I'm often sent WhatsApps from family members. Should I be drinking apple cider vinegar to elude rage and all these kind of, that's the more harmless end. In COVID, there were many aunties suggesting very bizarre things. And every time, my mother-in-law is one of the big believers in all this stuff. So we have circular conversations every time I go and visit her. But yeah, I think I really take my hat off to you and people like you who are trying to spread sensible critical thinking in India, because if here it feels in the UK the skeptical community, whether it's not just in medical things but just science in general, or even if we're getting wider into sort of religion, feels pretty well established, and it doesn't feel controversial or dangerous to talk about any of these things. Maybe I feel like I'm fighting a losing battle, but I don't feel any risk. And I think that's not always the case. If I can do anything to help, then I'm happy, and hats off to all of you.
You've already helped a fantastic amount by being a part of this conversation. So thanks a ton. Take care of yourself, and I will hopefully talk to you very soon. And as for everybody watching, thank you so much for joining us for Rational Conversations. If you liked this interview, please give it a thumbs up. And if you like this kind of content, please subscribe. There's plenty more to come. There's plenty more to find on the channel. And do support me if you can. Become a member of the channel, or support me on Patreon @Rational. Until next time, be rational. Take care.